Well, I have a very long biography, and if Jay Doherty was here, he'd probably read all of this, but you know me better than that. Tony Karman is the EXPO Chicago president and director. Remember, don't make anyone who could unmake you. So, that was for Mr. Gussman. All right, Tony has been active in a lot of stuff, held many jobs, many jobs. He ran the art fair for Chris Kennedy. Those of you who are longtime City Club members know that when Chris came here, by the way, he does very well when he comes here. That whole thing with the slideshow and everything, he did a great job there. Many other things, including Director of Marketing and Development for the Auditorium Theater Council. We've reconciled now on that one. And in other words, he has been involved with a lot of stuff dealing with the art world. Enough from me. Ladies and gentlemen, Tony Karman.
Thank you all. Dr. Green, Father Ryan, thank you for that great prayer. We'll use it in September. That's helpful. This is humbling, and many of you know I prefer to speak extemporaneously. I do have prepared marks. This is an extraordinary moment for me. It seemed I'm looking at individuals that gave me great advice and counsel for many, many years. I'm standing here at an organization that's devoted to our great city, and I get to stand here and really comment about how proud, how proud I am to have been a part of the last 30 years in Chicago. Many of you may be looking at that picture and wondering, why is there a Greek immigrant or an immigrant with a fruit cart on the screen? This is my chance to actually pay a little bit of homage to my great-grandfather and grandmother who immigrated about 100 years ago to Chicago. He was a fruit peddler on the west side. That's actually not him. I had to steal that from the internet. Sorry. Yeah, take it a little bit away. But, you know, they made that pilgrimage to America. He was a fruit peddler near the Chicago Stadium. He passed away in 1930. My grandmother, or Yaya, had 5 kids, spoke very little English, and was really saved by Jane Addams and Jane Addams' Hull House. And I don't think there's any more greater of a Chicago story than that. And I'm proud that not only maybe they're up there as well as my parents, smiling a bit, proud that I could come and move to Chicago and play a little role in the cultural and business and civic communities. That's the unprepared remarks. Now for the prepared ones. I begin today with a few simple and most obvious statements. Chicago has a long legacy of hosting an international contemporary and modern art fair. An annual art fair has played an important role in shaping our city's cultural identity. And most importantly, this is the storied foundation that EXPO Chicago is proud to build upon. My personal introduction to this long legacy began in 1982, having just moved to Chicago from Rock Island, Illinois, where I was raised. I came to our city with a very simple plan: stay with my relatives for a bit, make a little bit of money, and then hopefully move west. 30 years later, I never did make that move. And before I go back to where my introduction to an art fair happened, I want to say as a proud citizen that I am extremely grateful for the long-term friendships and alliances that I have had the distinct honor to build, and for the even longer list of mentors and civic leaders who have guided me throughout my career, many of whom are here today. So I could humbly stand here today to address this illustrious crowd. From the heart, and to all of you, thank you. Now, back to 1982. I first learned of the Chicago International Art Exposition and knew immediately that I had to be a part of it. With little more than a liberal arts degree, a love of production, and an earnest desire to contribute, I took a job as a security guard for the 1983 fair. After the trucks were loaded in and the outer gates were locked, I proceeded to make myself indispensable by helping the exhibitors in any way that I could. I chased crates for them, and ultimately did whatever they needed. And I most fondly remember shuttling them down to the Checkerboard Lounge to experience the true heart of our city. Soon after, I was offered a job with a producing organization to manage Chicago's first in-water boat show, and so my career began. As many of you know, from the early 1980s to the early 1990s, there were only 3 major art fairs in the world: Chicago, Basel, and Cologne, with Chicago being the only fair in North and South America and the place for top dealers to participate, art collectors and professionals to annually visit, and if you were an emerging gallery, to begin your career. Times were much different then. The art world was much smaller, and Navy Pier was a collection of dilapidated sheds, both loved for the grand setting and reviled for their notorious holes in the roof. But that one event put Navy Pier and our city on the map, and Navy Pier, like the Grand Palais in Paris, became synonymous with Chicago and legendary in the art world. Actually, it is not a stretch to add that the importance of the Chicago International Art Exposition probably helped inform the redevelopment of Navy Pier. As the Metropolitan Pier and Exposition Authority was considering its future use, and maybe even its name, and about to commit millions of dollars to its renovation, they recognized that they could not displace the exposition and wisely designed the 170,000 square foot festival hall to ensure that one of the most successful tourism draws in our city at that time would continue to prosper. The Chicago International Art Exposition ran each year at Navy Pier until 1993, when the pier went under construction. This was a period of what was remembered as the Art War years, when Chicago hosted 3 concurrent fairs, and the winner was to be awarded the contract to return to Navy Pier after the renovation. During that time, a newly formed Art Chicago was held in a temporary structure, and in 1995, it was chosen to relocate to the newly renovated venue and grew in stature and international prominence. Art Chicago then left the pier, moving to Grant Park in 2006. And in the following year, it was saved by the Merchandise Mart, where it took place until its cancellation at the Mart in 2012. And actually, it was during that period of time that I re-entered the business, as I was hired by the Merchandise Mart and Chris Kennedy in May of 2006 as its director, and held that position until my resignation in 2010. Throughout this long history, I'm proud to acknowledge that I have never missed attending an art fair in Chicago. That really is 30 years. And whether I was professionally involved or simply a patron, I am extremely grateful to draw upon that perspective and experience as we shape the next chapter. Why EXPO Chicago? It is too simple to say that I had to. I just had to. I had built trusting relationships with many leading art dealers from around the world, and the opportunity and honor to be an ambassador for our city at many of the major international art fairs around the world. Everywhere that I went, I heard a yearning for our city to play at the top again. Why? We have history on our side. We are strategically located to attract collectors from the greater Midwest, both coasts, Latin America and Europe, and there is a great respect for our museums, institutions, schools, curators, collectors, and most importantly, an overall love for everything that our magnificent city offers. I officially announced EXPO Chicago, and the name is an homage to the old Chicago International Art Exposition, back in June of 2011 with a rental agreement from Navy Pier, a nascent company formed with key strategic partners, a supportive group of financial investors, an extraordinary team of talented and committed individuals, a most loving wife encouraging me to take the risk, and a steadfast commitment to do several things. Present an exposition that was built on quality, not quantity. Return the fair to the venue that was built for it. Carve out a new time in the art fair calendar, opening the fall art season with a great international art fair in a great American city. Establish an unwavering commitment to excellence in both design and representation. And to stay true to my pledge to produce an international art exposition that exceeds the expectations and aspirations of our galleries, institutions, museums, schools, collectors, and artists within our city. The initial announcement was met with a mixture of responses. But early on, key individuals like local dealer Rona Hoffman, civic leaders Jack and Sandy Guthman, Helen Goldenberg, Lou and Susan Manilow, Howard and Donna Stone, Scott Hodes, Madeline Grinstein, James Rondo, and many, many others I hate to make a list sometimes because I probably could spend the next hour and a half giving you many more names, but they all joined to provide great counsel and guidance. We hired the celebrated architect Jeannie Gang to design the fair. We recruited top local collectors to once again open their homes. We introduced Vernissage, or reintroduced Vernissage, the renowned opening night preview benefiting the Museum of Contemporary Art. We began a relationship with the venerable financial institution, the Northern Trust. We attracted a stellar group of galleries to participate. We gained the critical support of Mayor Emanuel and Commissioner Michelle Boone from the Department of Cultural Affairs and Special Events. And the collective of all of this culminated in the success of our inaugural fair last September. Now, as we are about to open our second edition this September 19th to the 22nd, I must confide in you by revealing that sophomore years are, let's just say, a different challenge. Although we had a lot to prove in year one, I would be foolish not to recognize that there is much more to prove in year two. I would also be remiss if I didn't declare that this is a commercial venture and that our 125 dealers from 17 countries and 36 international cities have taken a huge financial risk to come to Chicago. They are here to sell art to our local collectors, meet new prospective buyers, connect with curators and arts professionals, and to that end, there are no passes if that does not occur. They are depending on us to prove that there is a vibrant marketplace here and that we have the ability to attract the greater Midwest and the world's collectors to attend once again. I'm ever confident that we will achieve our goals, and we've put a great deal of work into preparing for our second year. The foremost hurdle was maintaining the extraordinary quality of our exhibitors, and working closely with our illustrious selection committee, we exceeded expectations last year, and we can be equally proud of the 2013 exhibitor list, as it represents over 60% of dealers returning, with important new additions from around the world joining us. Our exposure section, which features emerging galleries aged 7 years and younger, was also well received, and we had a very strong return, hitting our maximum capacity of 20 galleries this year. I'm exceptionally honored to acknowledge the increased support of our presenting sponsor, the Northern Trust. Together, we have integrated our outreach and programming efforts to ensure that their global clientele will mark their calendars for Chicago, and their generous support and guidance has also allowed us to expand our outreach by hosting numerous dinners and events, both regionally and nationally, to personally connect to top collectors and institutions. Beginning immediately after last year's fair, we launched a nearly $1 million advertising and marketing campaign to herald the 2013 exposition through various media outlets, including national print, international art magazines, local TV, radio, and local print, and of course, the internet. Adding to that effort, we intensified our personal outreach to our database of over 15,000 worldwide collectors, museum officials, and art enthusiasts to participate in our extensive VIP program that is packed with over 80 special events and tours, all of which designed to offer a unique experience for the visitors joining. Every one of our programs were new last year. Well, really everything was new last year. And it was a pleasure to be able to make improvements and refine, and there has been a few new additions. Our critically acclaimed dialogues, conference, and panel programming, produced in conjunction with the School of the Art Institute, returns with a full schedule of talks, and we are proud to be hosting an illustrious group of artists and arts professionals to engage in provocative dialogue and discourse about current issues in the arts. Highlights include Michelle Grabner, a Chicago artist and educator chosen to curate the next Whitney Biennial. That's an extraordinary thing for our city to herald. Renowned artist Jesper Just, Solveig Ostavo, the new executive director of the Renaissance Society. That too is important, as the Renaissance Society is under new leadership after 40 years, and it ushers in another wonderful new chapter for a great institution in our city. Our large-scale site-specific installation program called In Situ also returns with works curated by Shamim Momin of the Los Angeles Nomadic Division and highlighted by works by Glenn Kano, Sanford Biggers, Dan Gunn, Michael Rakowitz, Shanique Smith, Alex Soth, and many others. We also have over 20 special exhibitions on the show floor, done in partnership with organizations like the Natural Resources Defense Council, the Human Rights Watch, the Andy Warhol Museum, Independent Curators International, the Chicago Artists Coalition, to name a few. And now this year, the edition of EXPO Video, which is done with support of Columbia College, providing an opportunity for patrons to engage a curated selection of video works presented in specially designed structures by Studio Gang architects. In addition to that project, I am especially proud to have renewed our overall partnership with Jeannie Gang and Studio Gang Architects to further refine the interior environment. Her genius did much to establish our credibility by elevating the art viewing experience, bringing clarity, efficiency, comfort, and energy to the art fair. She set the tone in year one with a unique floor plan, punctuated by an avenue, a diagonal avenue, we like to call it Milwaukee Avenue, allowing visitors the option to move diagonally through the fair, engaging them with 3 large structures or cones suspended overhead, designed to reflect the art and activity below while creating mini atmospheres where patrons can rest and socialize. I would say get ready because there will be a few surprises this coming month. I'm extremely delighted to announce the premiere of 3 purchase and cash awards. The first, Andre Stone Emerging Artist Prize, honors the late Chicago art dealer Andre Stone, that will be funding a piece of artwork by an emerging artist and gifted to the Museum of Contemporary Art, Chicago. The Artadia Expo Chicago Award will be a cash prize awarded by the National Arts Organization Artadia to a Chicago-based artist. This is a cash award. And then the Northern Trust will be purchasing and donating a piece of artwork to the Department of Prints and Drawings at the Art Institute of Chicago. All 3 of those awards are extraordinary great steps in this second year, and I look forward to working with the organizations and other organizations to potentially increase those gifts. Our partnership with the Women's Board of the MCA also continues with our Vernissage opening night benefit on Thursday, September 19th. And we have also partnered with the Art Institute of Chicago, the Society for Contemporary Art, the Renaissance Society, the School of the Art Institute, Columbia College, the University of Chicago, the Arts Club, the Hyde Park Art Center, of course I could keep going, and many more on over 75 special art events and openings throughout our city. Finally, back in February, we officially launched EXPO Art Week, and this was done in cooperation with Choose Chicago and the Department of Cultural Affairs and Special Events, to further leverage the extraordinary cultural assets of our city. To date, EXPO Art Week has developed over 100+ partnerships with Chicago restaurants, theaters, performing arts institutions like Steppenwolf, the CSO, the Goodman, the Lyric Opera, Harris Theater, Joffrey Ballet, to name a few. And many of them have joined with us to herald not only this comprehensive week, but to their patrons, but to their huge database around the world. By the numbers, I have read that Art Basel Miami Beach generates an estimated $500 million in economic impact for the city of Miami each December. And I should say, as I was talking about the history, and I wouldn't expect any of you to do the math, for 21 years, that was the fair that was in our city. But what that has done for Miami is far more impactful than the money. It has reshaped the city's cultural identity. We, of course, already have and great museums, institutions, schools, galleries, but the opportunity for us to generate even more support for our visual arts community is well within our grasp. EXPO Chicago will be an important generator of international cultural tourism, and its impact will be felt for years with our hotels, restaurants, boutiques, and museums filled with high net worth and clientele, and a legion of cultural visitors eager to experience everything from an apartment gallery to the Art Institute, to the Hideout, to Ikram, to Hot Doug's, to Alinea. I've been quoted many times also saying that September in Chicago is like December in Miami, and it is our plan to stake a long-term claim on this month and on the International Art Fair calendar so the world knows to make an annual pilgrimage to our city, as they now do to New York, London, Paris, Cologne, Madrid, Mexico City, Hong Kong, Miami in the other months. I'm extremely grateful that our museums and institutions have also made calendar adjustments to align openings with the fair this year. And I'm even more hopeful that date alignments with large blockbuster shows and leading exhibitions will occur in the future. Additionally, by working closely with our many cultural partners as a part of Expo Art Week, we plan to develop new programming alliances and date synchronicity, allowing much more, or allowing all of us to benefit more from increased attendance and exposure. As the exposition played a role in the first redevelopment of Navy Pier and as a hopeful long-term tenant, I look forward to working closely with Navy Pier Inc., the board, and all of the management team on their architectural and design as they shape the next phase of Navy Pier. I doubt that any trade show exhibitor using Festival Hall has a greater feeling of ownership more than the international art dealers, and there is no question that the Pier's future goals of hitting a design note to match the elegance and impact of Millennium Park is shared with Expo Chicago and the thousands of visitors that we hope to attract. In addition to our partnership with leading cultural institutions, I believe that there is much more that we can do to collaborate with our leading businesses, civic organizations, corporations, and universities to provide additional opportunities to invite the world's business leaders to Chicago each September. I say that because worldwide business leaders tend to be the major art collectors and art patrons of their respective cities and countries, and it serves both the exposition and our city if we work together to find additional ways to both invite them to Chicago and encourage them to explore and invest in our city. I am also hopeful that Expo Chicago can play a central role working in conjunction with our civic leaders and institutions to initiate and present large-scale public art installations on the scale of, let's say, Olafur Eliasson's Waterfalls done on the Brooklyn Bridge, or Leo Vioral's recent light sculpture on the Golden Gate Bridge. Both, if aligned with our dates, would further attract art world's enthusiasts and stir our local citizenry. We can also be very proud of the city's efforts to draft and implement the newly released cultural plan. We value the opportunity to contribute to many of the key initiatives that are outlined in that document, and I sincerely hope that the Expo Chicago can play a larger role in shaping new ideas like a future art or architectural biennial or triennial that could provide even greater impact for the visual arts community, design, and architectural communities. All would benefit if this could be achieved. Most importantly, I hope that Expo Chicago makes a considerable contribution to the artists living and working in our city, creating new opportunities to support their work and driving more collectors and curators into our galleries and museums year-round. With leading art schools based in Chicago and a long list of internationally recognized artists like Theaster Gates, Nick Cave, Kerry James Marshall, and many others keeping their studios and practice here, we have much to be proud of. The world needs to recognize the abundance of talent that is working in Chicago, and it is our duty as a city to nurture their practice, provide incentives to keep artists living and working here, and to encourage new collectors and patrons of the arts. If you want to identify a real growth industry, simply look to the coasts and other great cities in the world to see what can happen when the abundance of internationally recognized artists and multinational galleries both operate and find a marketplace there. There is great potential here, and really, this should be our future. I'm confident in stating that I genuinely expect that the annual Expo Chicago will make a positive contribution to the arts and cultural ecosystem of our city. It is inherent in our mission to be of service to that community, and on behalf of all of us associated with the exposition, I remain extremely grateful for the overwhelming support we continue to receive from our mayor, the city, Navy Pier, the Park District, the long list of civic, business, cultural, media leaders representing our great institutions that comprise our civic committee, and the many collectors and arts professionals throughout the world who have rallied to herald our return. There is no more beautiful city to live in, nor a more hardworking city dedicated to the pursuit of excellence, nor brimming with civic pride. I want to sincerely thank the City Club of Chicago for honoring me with this opportunity today. And I would like to close with the spirited comments made at last year's exposition by one of the world's most influential voices in the art world today. It was the senior critic of the New York Magazine, noted writer, real raconteur, and transplanted Chicagoan by the name of Jerry Salz. And Jerry, we brought him in to do a keynote, and he was getting awfully riled up about art fairs in the world. I wish I could do him. I can't. But he said, excuse me, Chicago is a real city with real artists, with real galleries, with real museums, with real collectors. Move aside, Art Basel, Miami. And with his words, and I'd say with all due respect, he is awfully right about our city. And we are the real deal. Everything that's going on, all the organizations that you're a part of and institutions that you support. And I do look forward to seeing all of you at our second edition next month, and to usher in what I hope is a long-term tradition for the city of Chicago. Thank you all. Thank you.
If you have any questions, bring them up here. I certainly understand why you picked September.
That's for sure.
Not much chance of any competition from World Series. Okay.
Boom. That's it.
All right. I had to work hard for this job, ladies and gentlemen. Jay Doherty spares no expense. And I emphasize the word no. Here we go. Yvonne Darcy, UIC. Congratulations. Roughly how many local artists will participate in the Expo or be represented in the Expo?
Great question. And I don't have to put my reading glasses on. That's why I was struggling with some of that written script. We have about 16 galleries represented in the fair this year from Chicago, which is up about 4 galleries from last year. If I did a little bit of math, I would say that we probably have about 25 or 30 artists that are working in Chicago that are probably represented by those galleries. Extraordinary names. But I think it's what is most important to me is that not only is it what's happening at Navy Pier, but it's the opportunity for the visitors that are joining for Expo Chicago that are coming to our city to also explore what's happening in the galleries that aren't represented in the fair. We have committed to, sounds like a advertisement, I don't mean to, we've committed to shuttle buses that are going to run 2 circuits, one from Navy Pier to the MCA to River North back to Navy Pier, another circuit running from Navy Pier to the Art Institute to the West Loop back to Navy Pier, and that's our commitment to make sure that we're engaging the full community. And I would venture to say, with that outreach, many artists in Chicago will benefit. I wish I had an exact number, and I have to say that you might have caused me to go back and put a pen to paper and see what I could do and get a total in case I'm asked that question again. And thank you for the congratulations.
Bending the rules, which we seldom do, but Mr. Hood, you have a question?
I have a question, Tony.
Stand up, stand up.
Come on, we're family.
Last week, the New York Times had a front-page article that basically said the art fair movement has totally and radically changed the art selling around the world. Now, obviously, Expo Chicago and its predecessors started that whole movement. So what do you see for the gallery system per se? And is it true you think there's going to be a series of art expos around the world for dealers?
There's no question, and I promised that I would never say this on camera, but there's probably too many art fairs in the world. And I think that if you begin with that premise, the selling of art in galleries has changed by virtue of galleries have had to commit a great deal of money, I said that in my talk, to make sure that they're reaching a new audience. And I think that you're seeing a lot, whether you're in London or New York, you're seeing a lot of galleries, mid-career galleries, that are having a hard time with the sheer cost of operating, whether it's in their cities like in Chelsea and New York, and maintaining a full roster of artists. In that regard, they are not only having problem or an issue with the cost and the expense of doing business in their city, but they're having to weigh what the commitment is to art fairs in the world. And we are being judged on that decision of how many they choose to do. There's no question that some of the galleries that participated last year did Expo Chicago and then chose not to do one of the other 8 fairs or 7 fairs that they had done the year before. My hope, more than anything else, and this is where I remain bullish, is that we have a strategic position that we can fill, and there's no question that, as I'm repeating myself, that history was on our side. But we represent a window or a doorway to the greater Midwest collector-based museums, and most of the galleries in the art world know that they need to touch that marketplace. The second thing is having another great international fair in a great American city is important for a lot of the European dealers. And I think with current economic conditions worsening in Europe, they're looking to find opportunities. So I don't know if I fully answered that question, but the unfortunate thing for galleries, and I think it's a real issue, is they're being forced to look at their bottom line daily on what they're participating in, what their overhead is, and taking whether they can take a risk on these art fairs or not. Yeah.
Anybody else? Sure, we don't have to write questions. This is a city club. You could break all the rules. Yes, Joel.
Tony, follow up on Bill's question. It struck me when I read that New York Times article and thinking about the resurgence of our expo, that there might be some parallel that might occur in the gallery world to what is occurring in journalism and so on. And I wondered if you saw any evidence of it. In other words, virtual galleries have only hit the trail of the expositions around the world and the internet.
Well, there's no question that the internet is a marketplace that is maturing. We partner with one of the larger providers called ArtSpace, and it's not taken any business away. We've partnered with ArtSpace, aligned with Expo Chicago, to give the participating galleries a greater footprint to reach a collector or a patron. I honestly think that the art fairs aren't going away because of the need for a dealer and an artist to connect directly with curators and collectors in cities all over the world. Now, it doesn't mean that the internet isn't going to be continue to build, but that you can't replace that connection. And I think that in that regard, the old paradigm is the current, is the new, and will be the paradigm that I think will be in the future. I actually think that what will happen is I think there will be a number of art fairs that will not take place. I hope that we are not one of them, but I believe that the important need to convene in a great city just doesn't go away. The transaction between galleries, whether they could be virtual or not, is a whole nother another issue. All of the major art fairs have a basic criteria that says you can't participate unless you have a full exhibition schedule. So, in essence, none of the art dealers participating in my fair or Art Basel or Art Basel Miami Beach or Frieze could participate unless they had a brick and mortar space. And I don't think that will change for many, many years. I think what is happening in the gallery world is some galleries are shrinking in size, maintaining a space just enough to have a series of exhibitions throughout the year, but not carrying 10, 15, 20,000 square feet if they don't have to.
Okay. When you have the art world here, rules are just,
Paul Levy, how did the galleries do last year, and were they generally satisfied?
Oh, great question. I think we established, well, what I wrote was really true. We established a great foundation to build upon. And I think that many of the galleries that joined that hadn't been at an art fair in Chicago in many years forgot that we aren't the city, or we are not the city that collectors are racing in on the Thursday night or the Wednesday night of the opening and racing to buy a picture or a piece. That was never the sell pattern of a art fair in Chicago, and it probably never will be. To answer you honestly, I think the galleries.
City Club, it's got to be.
Oh, good. Okay, good. I think the galleries did phenomenally well, which is reflected in the 60% return. That 40% doesn't reflect that people didn't do well and chose not to come back. In fact, I would say 10 galleries did extremely well, but couldn't come back this year because their schedules didn't permit them, but they hope to in future years. I think what was revealed after our inaugural year was there was a lot of transactions done at the fair, but there was a great deal of follow-up, which is very much a part of not only a pattern in any art fair, but surely this. And I think it's testament to our exhibitor list that the dealers that are returning and the dealers that have joined really do see the potential. And I can stand here today and look at all of you. Obviously, all of this is aspirational until it happens. But I'm standing here with great confidence, not overconfidence, in telling you that the art world is coming in huge numbers compared to last year. That's testament to our city, that's testament to our galleries, that's testament to our collectors, its civic leaders, our museums, our curators, and that's why they're coming. I know I'm repeating myself a bit, but there's just such love and respect for what is happening in Chicago that there's no question everyone wants this to work. So business was done. Hopefully more business will be done this year, but it's not just business, it's also who they get to see from a curatorial standpoint, which might lead to an exhibition that happens in a museum in another city. All of that is bundled into what they will regard as either success or failure. And I'm really proud to be standing here representing not only the fair, but a great team of individuals that have been committed to make this happen. And thank you.
Well, Tony, we have a written question
Great.
to close.
Yeah, because I can keep going. You know that.
No doubt about it, Tony, I can tell you that. Barbara Gutman, where are you? Way back there. Okay, there. Short answer, please.
Tough.
You're almost in overtime.
Okay.
Short answer. Good question. Does the lack of art reporters at local newspapers affect your show? Really?
How could I do that in a short amount of time?
Turn it into a multiple choice.
The honest answer is yes, for one reason. The art world has found, take any industry, has found its own network through the internet to communicate to itself. And the large amount of blogs and arts writers and magazines do a great job for all of us in this world to communicate. The lack of a great reviewer in a major newspaper or a major news outlet, the lack affects us to expand the potential for an individual to either take a chance to go to an art fair, but more importantly, give a chance to someone or give them a chance to explore what it means to go to a gallery or a museum or a theater or a performance. That's where I feel we are lacking that opportunity to reach the uninitiated, if that means, that's a terrible thing to say. But if you read the New York Times, every day in the newspaper, there is a review on any of the arts or any of the any cultural matters, not only happening nationally, but in New York. And I think that having the lack of a great critic or critics in our city as it relates to the larger print publications is a real loss. Now, my last part of that is maybe those print publications, and I'm not saying this to add to the demise of the printed newspaper, but maybe that may not matter anymore because of the other outlets that have been created. And I think that's a question that we should ask ourselves. As a producer of an art fair, I'm looking, and our team is looking, at every channel we can to communicate. But I think it's that lost opportunity to really turn someone on to take a chance to go into a gallery, or a museum, that is really a loss for culture in our city.
Round of applause. applause.